The 1800s also saw a brief experimentation with round and polygonal barns. Masterpieces of grace and efficiency. A ramp around the outside led to an upper story where hay was dropped down to the basement, where animals could walk around freely. Only about a dozen still exist in the state. Another rare structure was the tobacco barn, a design with layers of drying racks and hinged slats for airing out the leaves. Here is another interesting barn, custom built by wealthy engineer Frank Snyder. It was used lightly for his carriages and horses and kept in perfect condition. The second half of the 19th century was the most prosperous time for central New York, with a higher price on agricultural goods and demand from the Civil War. By this time, 2/3 of New York State farms were selling a surplus. Farmers were the most relevant and powerful people. Silos were built for extra grain storage. Triangular gable roofs were converted into gambrel roofs by creating 2 different slopes in each side, allowing for 50% more volume. Hay tracks were installed to move grain using horsepower, a metal trolley, and a giant claw. After the Civil War, railroads were built across the state, increasing production and sales for farmers. But it also allowed a quarter of the farming population to move Midwest in the following decades for even bigger business opportunities. In order to keep up with the new demand, New York farmers had to find innovative solutions, like this animal-powered saw. Within a few years, New York State was responsible for producing half of the nation's horse-drawn industrial machinery. Producing a bushel of corn went from 4.5 hours to 40 minutes. But the advent of electric and gas technology was the last straw for New York State. With the amount of industrialization and competition, it was a far less viable place for crops and livestock. Power shifted to the towns, where renters and wage earners began to thrive. Younger farmers were opting out of the family tradition. In the post-war era, much of the farmland was suburbanized. Between the 1950s and the 1990s, 3/4 of the 18,000 central New York farms went out of business. The abandonment of small-scale farming practice left many barns behind, subject to degradation and neglect.
This is a very old style barn based on the English barn frame. When we're done, the building is going to look just like it did when it was originally built, except that we're going to have a whole bunch of new timbers in place that are sawn exactly the same size as the originals and are joined with 2,000-year-old timber framing joinery. We want to keep as much of the original building in place and in use as possible. It just adds a lot to the historic value of the building. Every time I see a timber frame building going up, I see use of local material. It glorifies your local artisans. People want to have a building that they can be proud of.
I'm Evan Carpenter. I am the third generation on this farm. I have sons and grandchildren that are now active on the farm. I can understand why it is that most old barns aren't used, because they are not really conducive for modern mechanization of feeding animals and cleaning up after animals and stuff like that. It's a lot of hand labor. We've worked with it. I'd like to continue working with it. And so would my sons. They would like to keep the character of the barn still in the business somehow. Everybody just seems to call it the steep-roofed barn. It's very unique, built basically in the same style as most thrashing barns, just maybe a little more elaborate. It was originally built by Elias Cady. He was one of the original settlers in the Dryden area. He built this barn to kind of say, look, I made it. We're in the process of restoring it right now. We're probably going to be still milking cows out of it. Right now, most of our milk does go down to New York City or into Pennsylvania and get made into products and then comes back up again. You know, as a kid, I can remember going to the neighbors to buy eggs when there was an egg farm on George Road. We still go to Diedrich's fruit stand to get local produce. The local small farm, to be efficient, you had to get larger, use more machinery, more capital. That meant that it was more and more difficult for the little guy to make it. You know, you had to either get big or get out. Why we left? I just think that's the way society was going for a while. Aristocratic ladies like coming and gathering warm eggs from the hen house. And they'll pay more if they can actually go to the chicken coop and gather the eggs themselves than picking them up out of the cooler. It's connecting back to nature. I think there's a lot of people that just feel as though they're getting separated from it and they want to get back in some way. The pendulum swings.
When father bought the farm, we sold the farm, stuck his blood for rustic charm, sold his ghost as an antique to the city. And kids today can't hold a spade. Rest in peace, your weary trades. In this world there is no place, such a pity. Well, the barman shakes his head and fills my glass, says we're living in the past. Why preserve a dying craft and its misery? We sigh and say another modern man, one of property, not land. So I'll hold out this battered hand. Will you listen? Come sit down, we're lamenting about yesterday's sad ending, about the water in me whiskey, the brass passed off as gold. Another round, we're descending into old time memory of a day when wood was wood and silver, gold was gold. Sweet home was home.